Welcome to The Innovators. Each week, we're serving up real talk with badass women. We're dishing out the truth. No fluff here, no BS, just raw, honest stories and lessons to inspire and empower the next generation of trailblazing women. We're really here to keep it real and pay it forward. I'm your humble host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, investor, and advisor. It's a real pleasure today to have Margaret Honey, President and CEO of Scratch Foundation, join the podcast. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm really happy to be here.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Hey, I want to go back. You had this amazing background in science and technology and STEM and education. So how did you get here? Please share your journey.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and what I started to think about was a good friend of mine. Her name is Shirley Malcolm. She's an accomplished scientist, an amazing scientist, and she has spent many years of her career working at the American Association for the Advancement of Science on equity and inclusion issues. And she's a powerhouse. And she has this wonderful expression. She says, "We see the world from where we sit." I find that to be such a powerful statement because it allows us to account for both the personal and professional influences in our lives. So I grew up in a family that gave us lots of degrees of freedom to make choices that were ours. From an early age, I was always interested, I think, in really kind of testing the boundaries of how we learn and think across disciplines. And when it came time for college, I ended up at what was the time a very experimental institution called Hampshire College. It was radical. It believed in experiential and interdisciplinary learning, kind of in the extreme. And it was exactly the right place for me to learn and grow. When I eventually got to graduate school, I went to grad school at Columbia. I got lucky. And serendipity is another theme that runs throughout my life. But I got lucky and I got a job at Sesame Workshop back in the day when it used to be called Children's Television Workshop.
Yeah,
And I was assigned to work in a division, newly established division focused on new media and learning. This was the early 1980s. So a long time ago. Tech was brand new
yeah.
in all of our lives. And I got hooked. And it was really young people that hooked me. And my life's work has been about using different kinds of media on the design and learning side to support young people's curiosities and power their imaginations. So I'm now leading an amazing organization called the Scratch Foundation. Scratch, which was developed at MIT's Media Lab by a guy named Mitch Resnick, is the largest creative coding platform in the world. It draws kids between about the ages of 8 and 16. And just to give you a sense of scale, in 2024, we saw nearly 22 million new users sign up from every country in the world.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And since our inception, we've seen more than 140 million users engage with the platform. Um, so that's a little bit about me.
That's amazing. I mean, such an early stage about curiosity, right? New media curiosity. I mean, you really hit right when everything was actually starting. That is it's luck, but I think you kind of make your own luck. You had that innate curiosity that made you want to go in that direction though too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's very true. And, to Shirley's point, we see the world from where we sit.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to grow up in an environment where there was high degrees of tolerance for experimentation.
Yeah. Lucky you.
Yeah. Yeah, really lucky.
So along the way, I always ask this question. I'm always interested in, what's the most important or valuable piece of advice you've been given or lessons you've learned, and did you have mentors along the way? It's kind of two-parter.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, In the world I've worked in, the world of children's media, the most important advice that I learned very early in my career at the workshop is to listen to kids. What
Yeah.
are they saying? What are they telling you? And what can you learn and incorporate into your designs that reflect their aspirations and their ideas? And if it's okay with you, I can share a brief story
Yeah.
that brings this point home. So I left the workshop and joined the media division at Bank Street College of Education in the mid 80s. And at the time, Bank Street, which is in New York, was a mecca of children's media. It had a very innovative president, and he had all sorts of ideas about how to use the kid-centered progressive learning philosophy that has always defined Bank Street to develop amazing media for children. So we were working on a mixed media show, mixed media because we didn't at that point in time integrate video and software. It wasn't all in the same platform. So we were literally creating video that aired on PBS, software, and print materials. It was all repackaged and sold by educational publishers into schools. But it's kind of broadcast audience was the world of kids media in the PBS universe at the time. And I was a researcher on the project. So I literally was the person talking to kids. And I was working in an amazing school in East Harlem where there was a teacher with a fifth, sixth grade classroom, Bruce Cans, who had built his entire curriculum around studying the ancient Maya. And it turns out the season of the Voyage of the Mimi that we were working on was all about the ancient Maya. Bruce heard about this. He reached out. He was like, you have to come use my classroom. We'll be amazing. And we did. And he and his students were extraordinary. So, I was the lady. They knew me as like the lady that showed up every few weeks with a new rough cut or, mock-ups of interactive software, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So this is a very memorable story, and it will become apparent why. But I showed up with a rough cut where the conceit of the Mimi was that Mimi was a boat. An
Mhm.
archaeologist had chartered the boat to go down to the Yucatan to try to find a city that they knew existed, but archaeologists had never found. They knew it existed because artifacts kept turning up on the black market. So there was drama, there were bad guys, there were good guys, there was all of this. And in this episode, they are diving, the archaeologists are diving off the coast of Cozumel, and they come across this giant slab of stone underground, and they realize it's a Mayan stela that contains all this hieroglyphic information that is going to lead them to Site U. And the challenge, because this was PBS, it was an educational show.
Right.
So the challenge is how do you raise a 5,000 pound of stone off the bottom of the ocean? And when the crew came back from that shoot, I never got to go on these shoots. I was way too junior on the totem pole. But when they came back, they were all kind of grumpy. And I'm like, why are you guys so grouchy? You're just coming back from Mexico.
Right.
Missing shoot, swimming off the coast of Cozumel.
Yeah.
Boat, what could be bad? And they were like, oh, Sam wouldn't fake it. And I said, what do you mean Sam wouldn't fake it? What they explained to me, Sam Gibbon, the brilliant executive producer, never wanted to do anything that wasn't authentic in
Yeah.
the work he was doing with kids. So they had to figure out a legitimate way to get this artifact off the bottom of the ocean. And they ended up using giant plastic, big plastic, those big black plastic garbage bags, rope, and air from their hoses to inflate the bag. And it's a very, very, very dramatic moment in the episode where you see it working, floating to the surface. Apparently, it took them, like 10 takes to get it working. So it was a thing, but it always stood out in my mind because Sam was absolutely right. So when I showed this to the kids in Bruce, Kansas classroom, and I came back, they were riveted. They were always riveted, but they were riveted. Came back a couple weeks later, and Bruce was like, Margaret, you got to go talk to Jose. Just ask him what he did. So I go over and talk to Jose, and he goes, oh, I tried, that episode you showed us with the thing coming off the butt. Well, I tried to create the whole thing in my bathtub.
That's so cute. I love it.
And I'm like, well, how'd you do that? And he goes, well, I used a brick and then I
Mhm.
used string and then I used baggies. And I was like, well, what did you do for air? And he goes, you know those bendy straws?
Ah,
And
it's
he
great.
said it didn't work very well. And of course, like the reason why that story is so memorable is because it was, he was motivated
Yeah,
to try to figure out how they solve this problem.
right.
And it really doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Like that is the power of really good media is when it puts in kids' hands the desire and motivation to try something, to
Right.
experiment, to test. And, that became a kind of driving force throughout my life. So, I've had wonderful mentors. And I think, back to what I said at the beginning, it's pay attention to the wisdom of kids. I
Yeah.
worked with another wonderful woman at Bank Street, Jan Hawkins, who's no longer with us, but an amazing, talented researcher, thinker, educator. And she taught me so much about the power of generosity, staying open to the world and possibility. And, the final person I would call out is Nick D'Onofrio, who was EVP of Innovation at IBM for many years and co-chair of the board when I ran the Hall of Science. Um, and Nick was also a believer in keeping an open mind, but I think fundamentally, he taught me the importance of like always learning, right? Put your hubris aside, stay open, always learn. So those those are the lessons that I carry around with me.
I love the fact of always keeping kids at the forefront and listening to them. I mean, you cannot go wrong in building out great media when you're actually listening to the audience, not talking to them, but listening to them and providing them with content, ideas, letting them use their imagination to come up with new
Yeah.
things. That's a winning combination for any company, let alone a nonprofit that's serving 170 million kids around the world and 500,000 new projects a day. Like it's crazy the numbers that you guys have. Um, from a nonprofit perspective, kind of what's changing in the nonprofit world? How is Scratch evolving? And AI, EIEIO as I call it now, AIEIO. How is that impacting what you're
Yeah,
going to be doing in the future?
great question. So, I've thought a lot about what makes Scratch so special. And I think it goes back to this idea that you just underscored, which is it really centers kids' agency, their passions, and their ideas. And, that's what's led to phenomenal growth. Um, and, in the spirit of continuing to support that growth, we are as an organization in a laser-like way focused on three priorities. We are sustaining and innovating this amazing platform, and I'll come back to that when we talk about AI. We're also, because we are a nonprofit, so we lead with our mission. So amplifying our impact through partnerships, through programs, through our research collaborations is really important. And to accommodate and be able to sustain our amazing growth, we are now building a new business model for the organization, which will enable us to both importantly earn sources of repeatable revenue,
Mhm.
as well as continue to get important contributions from the philanthropic sector. And what's underway does relate to AI. It's really exciting. We're developing a roadmap for Scratch 4.0, which will be the next kind of major release of the platform, the next generation of Scratch. And we're focusing on two big areas of what we feel is really exciting work. So, one area is where we're exploring how to use AI around creative making and project building, the actual work that kids do when they use Scratch. And what we want to do that we think is distinctive and important given Scratch's commitment to centering kids, their ideas, their creativity, is we want to use AI as a kind of creative thought partner that can help young people develop and grow their creative superpowers. They have these superpowers in spades. And, as all of us that are experimenting with AI have seen that, particularly when you lean into using AI, not as the thing that's going to answer X, Y, and Z for you. It can do that in some regards. But as a thought partner, it can accelerate your own thinking, your own ideas, right? In ways that are really important. So, true to what Mitch did originally by creating an accessible approach to coding so kids could use it as a tool for building their own ideas, their own passion projects. We really want to do the same with AI, create an accessible, kid-friendly, playful approach to AI where it's not a tutor,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a thought partner that is really helping you do creative work
Yeah.
in ways that center your agency as a learner and as a maker and a doer. And the other area, so Scratch also runs a big global online community. You can kind of think of it as a Scratch social media platform just for Scratchers.
Mhm.
And it's extremely valuable to young people. They talk about it, they reference, they use it all the time. They trade ideas, they trade code, they show off their work. We have a mechanism within the community called studios where they can create themed areas where kids contribute. And what what we're really interested in doing is figuring out how AI can help deepen the nature of collaborative work that goes on within the community in ways that are both safe
Mhm.
and richer
Mhm.
for deeper conversation. So we're working on this early idea. We call it digital playgrounds, where think of them as like friend groups or affinity groups
Yeah. Yeah.
that are set up for a certain period of time,
Yeah.
where you get to work closely, deeply, and safely with your friend group or your class group or your affinity group. So that's the other way. And, I think the role Scratch has to play in the AI and learning universe is we're not trying to be what a lot of people are trying to use AI for, which is a tutor or a time saver to make learning more efficient. There's lots of that to make it deliver what you need at just the right moment in time. There's lots of that kind of work and thinking going on out there. We really want to lean into creativity, to curiosity, to imagination. And I think if Scratch can play a significant role in creating, a set of resources within the platform that do that, we will have done something very distinctive and important in the AI and learning space for young people.
I would guess that you're probably one of the only ones thinking in that direction. Because my conversations with other companies and people is always like I'm always worried about who's putting kind of the gates around this because
Yeah,
it's so open and you can say anything to it, it can do anything, where you're really focused on kids creativity, curiosity, safety,
Yes.
and the availability of using those technology platforms to really build something special
Yeah.
that's really just for them, that
Yeah.
allows them to be in an environment that's safe, that's controlled, where they can explore their curiosity, build new things, and obviously build communities around those too, which are great. I mean, those are all the skills we need going forward in the
And
world. It's not
and
just it has
yeah,
sides.
a shout out to our partners in this work and our collaborators. In a fairly early stage company called Emergence AI, the founders come out of IBM Research, and they did early work with an education AI startup. Um, and what they built as their initial product in that work was really a kind of Siri or Alexa for the classroom that enables teachers to use voice to call up digital assets in real time as part of their instructional routines. And as part of that work, this is one of the things that really attracted us to them. They thought a huge amount about safety and data privacy issues and all of those kinds of things. So there are many ways and strategies that they have in their hopper to help us. Those are real problems. I don't want to,
Right.
underestimate them or diminish them. But the point is, in Emergence AI, we have a partner that is not only as committed to the potential and possibilities and importance of creative learning as we are, but that really deeply understands also the importance of safety
Yeah.
and security within the AI world.
That's great. It's really amazing. I can't wait to see what's next. What do you think nonprofit leaders are most worried about today? I mean, obviously always funding, but what keeps them up at
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends a little bit. Back to Shirley again. It
night?
depends on where you sit, right? So,
Yeah.
from where I sit, I think there's a big difference, a big important difference between what young people are motivated to learn and
Mm,
what they're expected to learn.
yeah.
I think one of the big challenges that we face broadly in our education system is the challenge of motivation, which is foundational to kids' creativity.
Yeah.
You don't get one without the other.
Yeah.
So, if you're in school and if you're being asked, and many schools do this, to fill out worksheets all
Right.
day long,
Right.
you don't have an opportunity to exercise your imagination.
Right.
Alternatively, if you create a context in which young people have the opportunity to think through how you design something, how to make something, how to shape something, you're fundamentally altering the dynamics of learning. And there's really interesting research, Cynthia, out of the field of neuroscience that shows those kinds of productive maker-like learning environments light up critical parts of our brains that
Mm,
are essential to imagination and creativity. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So, I've worried about this for a long time. It's not a new worry, but
yeah.
it's a persistent worry.
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest mistakes that we've made as a nation is putting so much emphasis on a narrow set of tests.
I can't even tell you how much I agree with that.
Yeah, testing is not inherently bad. And
No.
there are, incredibly thoughtful people that
Yeah.
we are working with now, that we've worked with in the past, that have been, their work has long painted a picture of what is possible with more thoughtful assessment systems. But we've been doing this for a long time as
Yeah.
a nation, for
Yeah.
about 30 years now.
Yeah.
Um, and sort of the great irony is we're not seeing significant improvements in
Exactly.
kids' performance, right? Where
Exactly.
kids succeed is in environments where they have the agency to solve problems,
Right.
not to fill out worksheets or spend hours doing test prep. So, I think that particularly in the this day and age of AI,
Yeah.
where we we once again are in a position because of technological advances of asking ourselves what makes us distinctly human.
Mm.
At Scratch, we say imagination is the currency of the future. And I believe that's true. So I think, creative learning boils down to giving kids a degree of autonomy and agency to make choices about the kinds of problems they want to solve and ensuring that they have the tools and resources to go about solving them. That's really that really sort of positions learning in the process of doing, not just in the outcome. And it's that process of doing, it is for all of us, right? We never stop learning, right? And what each of us values in our day to some degree are the mistakes we make that teach us things, right? That get us thinking differently about a problem. And I I think we're going to be in real trouble if we don't get it right.
Well,
So
that whole imagination is the currency of the future. I mean, that is 1,000% true. And that kind of critical thinking, starting at an early age, is what's going to compel them to take on the bigger problems of the world, because it's going to take creativity for climate change. It's going to take creativity to redefine economics. It's going to take not just taking tests. I know lots of people who take great tests, they give good tests, but they can't, MBAs, and they can't run a business. But it's like you got an MBA, but you have no practical experience. You haven't learned how to critically think. You didn't even take an ethics class. Like, yeah, there's that too. But that whole just test, 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 test is
yeah,
is a sad is a sad fact, but I'm hoping that, with Scratch's help and what you guys are doing, we can, turn that tide, because it is invaluable, the skills of creativity and learning, and kids doing things that actually excite them and excel their learning, again, lighting up parts of their brain. It will make them better learners, better bosses, better employees, better people, frankly.
absolutely. We are in violent agreement.
I love.
100%. Yeah.
My last question is, what would you give your 25-year-old self? What kind of advice would you give yourself? Looking,
Right. So I would say you got to show up. And there's part of me that really wants to emphasize you got to show up not just virtually,
right?
but you got to show up in person. And the most important thing you can do is remain open to possibility. I believe, and I could list hundreds of examples of this, is that serendipity plays a big role in life. But you can only take advantage of it, if you create the time and space for chance encounters and you don't let your life script get in the way of possibility, right? So I think like what I learned from people who have mentored me about the importance of listening to kids
Mhm.
when you're talking about the creating in the digital media space for young people is a piece of this because that listening is about an openness, about a staying open, staying attuned, being willing to not work with a set of fixed ideas, but with a set of fluid ideas that are shaped by others. I think I think like those ingredients are so important, particularly in a world that is really truly evolving in at unprecedented speed and in unprecedented ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Margaret, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I know my listeners are gonna love, love, love this conversation. And thank you for everything you're doing at Scratch. It's amazing.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the opportunity. And I love that you're doing this podcast. I've become a fan.
Oh,
So
I
it's a
love it.
good thing for the world and for all the women out there that are trying to make their way.
Thank you so much.